Chapter 23. The Enemy Armada. Battle's End. I bid you adieu. The shuttle veered its way to the edge of the system before the jump to light speed. Wanda looked over the console one last time as she prepared to engage the warp engines. It had been a long time since she had piloted a ship alone. It took most of the last few hours to refresh on the basics and adjust to any modifications that had been made since then. It wasn't as if she couldn't fly anything from Altera, but the controls had to be in just the right place. The engine had to have the right amount of hum as to not rattle the insides too much, and the seat had to have just the right amount of cushion for her to sit in comfortably. Wanda never considered herself to be a meticulous person when it came to the things she preferred, and she was the only one who shared that sentiment. "Well, that ought to do it," she said to herself. Just as she was about to engage the warp engines, an alarm went off. She glanced over at the sector screen, confused by all of the red dots that had suddenly appeared. After pressing a few buttons, the image zoomed in for a more detailed look. For the life of her, Wanda could not recall any meteor storms passing through this part of the system before, at least not that size. It must be huge, she thought. The dots soon turned into little specks within the new image that appeared on the screen. Carefully, she tried to enhance the image as they were still far away, but close enough to where she could make out what was out there. The clearer the image became, the worse Wanda started to feel. Those were not meteors. She gasped. "What the hell is that?" Wanda continued to stare at the screen, stunned by what it showed. Hundreds of warships were making their way into the system. Wave after wave followed each line as the mass of green ships floated by uninhibited toward their destination. Altera. Wanda's insides began to shake with fear from the horrible sight. She knew that the planet did not have enough support to fend off a fraction of those numbers, let alone the entire fleet. It was all she could do to think about those who were trying to leave Altera. They won't be able to make it in time. A proximity alarm began to blare around her, snapping her attention back to what was at hand. Wanda checked the monitor again. Several fighters were pulling away from the fleet, their trajectory now pointing them in her direction. The shuttle's voice-activated system erupted over the loudspeaker. "Warning, hostile ships on an intercept course. Time of arrival, 1 minute. Without hesitation, Wanda stabbed the warp button. The shuttle shook, the stars blurred, then she was gone. Leaning forward, Wanda's head fell into her hands. It was the worst feeling in the world, knowing that her world was about to be destroyed, and there was nothing she could do about it. She could not remember the last time she cried. It had been at least a few 100 years. Try as she may, she just could not hold back the tears any more. Those poor people, they'll never make it in time. As much as she loathed Altera sometimes, there was nothing that could hold back her true feelings for her people. Nevertheless, she had to press on. So much relied on her presence elsewhere. She had to focus on the task at hand. For there was nothing known to Wanda that could stand in the way of such an oppressive force, and that scared her more than anything. "Ma'am, the enemy ships are turning about, heading straight for us," cried Joran. Kaya watched the view screen as the green cruisers were making their move. Her eyes scanned the bridge, searching for what to do. What would I do if I were in charge? She firmed her lips, knowing that they may still have a chance. "Nam, tell the fighters to form up, take a protective stance along the bow. Joran, turn us about, heading 0.0. Joran gulped as he turned back to her. "Ma'am, we're going to attack." Kaya nodded her confirmation. "Stand by all weapons," she ordered. "Fire on my mark when they come into range." The crew confirmed her orders. All weapon stations stood by, with gunners at the ready. Everyone prepared to carry out this one last surge of offence. The end run turned to face off against the capital ships, which were now heading toward them. The Alterian fighters formed in tightly around the ship, still keeping the enemy bombers at bay and doubling as the ship's shields as well. Devon pulled his fighter close to Brahms. "Are they doing what I think they're doing?" "Yes," Brahm replied, his voice responding with a hint of admiration. "Yes, they are." Brahm could feel the heat of the moment catching up to him. "Damn, I love a good battle." Large bolts of green light escaped the Alterian ship, blazing its way from behind the defence of their fearsome wave of fighters. The clash ignited at the centre of the battlefield, the invisible line in space that had kept them apart. Due to the longer gun range of the end run, the green enemy ships were soon overmatched by the surge of subdued Alterian aggression. The humans had much more to fight for now than they ever had, even if they had not realised it yet. With the constant barrage of fire and will, the battle was soon looking for the better, the Raelian fleet dwindling before their eyes. A massive explosion pitched the bridge of the Raelian ship, pressing the bow off to the side. With power failing, the flagship of the reptilian fleet began to list as it drifted helplessly before the human aggressors. Dern narrowed his sights from the intense flash. If he still had eyes, he would have surely lost them to the intense blaze of the blast. Many of his crew lay motionless upon the deck before him as sharp bursts of electrical surges fizzled from one end of the bridge to the other. The Raelian captain rose from his chair. So close, he thought. This was supposed to have been his triumphant victory over the pathetic human resistance. The grand arrival of the Raelian presence into the galaxy once again should have been heralded with a victory. Now, his ship was on the verge of destruction, his fleet decimated at the hands of their long-sworn enemy. Yet, he knew better. He knew that although the battle was lost, the war was far from over. "Fair play to you, humans," muttered Dern, watching the last volley of gunfire heading his way. "You have earned the respect of the Raelians today. Tomorrow will begin your doom." Devon steadied his fighter on the last bomber that came into sight. It was becoming more difficult to pilot his ship as a wave of aches and pains travelled along his backside. His legs cramped up on a few occasions, but that was nothing compared to what his posterior was doing. Even his old knee injury began to radiate pain around the surgery area. It had been at least 4 hours since they entered the fray of battle, and now the attackers' numbers had been reduced to almost nothing. Devon was amazed at how the end run had started to change its position in battle. At first, they withheld their abilities to let the fighters handle the small skirmish exchanges. Now, it was as if the 4th of July had started at full throttle. The massive turrets from the dark grey ship moved into position and opened fire on the smaller enemy ships back across the field of battle. Many bursts of ignited plasma enveloped the unsuspecting ships as the Pride of Altera was displaying her massive array of gun capabilities in this now apparent victorious battle. Squeezing the trigger button, bright green light shot out of the ship's cannon, piercing the bomber's hull. The enemy ship spun out of control before exploding into a ball of fire, which instantly extinguished as he passed by the wreckage. Devon breathed a sigh of relief. That was the last of them as far as he could see. There were many times that he would have loved to become a fighter pilot in his younger dream-filled days, and now, here he was living out that dream. Spinning the fighter around, Devon brought it alongside the wing of Brahm's ship. He could just catch the outline of Brahm's silhouette as he turned his head to look at him. "Not bad for a rookie," crackled Brahm's voice through Devon's helmet. "It's easy when I have the best teaching me," replied Devon. He could hear Brahm chuckle a bit, enjoying the ego boost. "All right, let's get back to the ship and assess the situation," ordered Brahm. all the fighters began to set their final course headings back for the end run. The day's battle was won. Devin's grin of contentment showed his heartfelt pride. However, he was feeling the sense that this was just the beginning. There was more out there, waiting for him. A small thought occurred to him as he began to understand his importance in it all. He could do this. If this was his calling, then he could do what was asked of him. Being a fighter pilot was one of the most exhilarating experiences of his life, and he had a few. Now, all they needed to do was plan their next move. Devin turned the flight stick to the side as he watched Brom's ship speeding ahead of him. "Call me hotshot," he thought. Devin pushed on. Nothing happened. He engaged the booster engine. Nothing. The ship was apparently coming to a standstill as he curiously checked over his instrument panel. Brom did not have time to show him everything he needed to learn about the console, but he knew enough to check what was going on with the power and vital stats of the craft. Everything appeared to check out all right, yet something was wrong. Something he could not place. Suddenly, the panel before him began to glow. Devin instinctively pulled his hands back. He looked out the cockpit window as the stars were still. He was at a complete stop. Devin focused on the other fighters far ahead of him, unaware of what was going on. Brom," said Devin through the communicator. "I seem to be having a problem." "Ma'am?" asked Nam, the communications officer.